Welcome back to another episode of Paranormal, the New Normal. I'm your host, as always, Jeremy, here trying to breach into the world of normalcy. Does it ever happen? Nah, no, rarely. It rarely, never happens. But once again, I bring a guest to help me on this epic quest. And okay, once you hear his name, you're gonna hear why I'm kind of laughing when I say that because it's kind of ironic. But I am joined today by Dr. Bruce Solheim, author, history professor, and paranormal experiencer to the max, and so much more. But we'll get into all that in a few minutes. How you doing tonight, Dr. Bruce?
I'm doing okay, Jeremy. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. I saw your information, and I was like, I have to have it. But I'm glad to have you on because you have a lot of experiences I cannot wait to break down and talk about. But first things first, the first question I ask everybody always is, what brought you down this path into the paranormal?
Well, I'll share with you the first line in my first paranormal book. It's not that I believe in ghosts, it's that ghosts believe in me, so I don't have a choice. So that's it. I was just brought into it. I didn't choose it. And I'm just making the best of it. And it's been going on since I was 4 or 5 years old. So but I'm learning how to manage it better as I get older, so that's good.
Yeah, I would say that's a good thing. Uh, well, I mean, that right there. I don't believe in ghosts. Ghosts believe in me. That sounds like a freaking symphonic metal song right there, if I ever heard one. And I'm a fan of that music, so that's a compliment coming from me. But,
Oh, cool.
uh, but well, it's been happening since you were young. My next question usually is, what experiences you've had? So I guess we'll just start with what happened when you were a kid that made you think that ghosts were coming for you, kind of in a way.
Well, my first experience was when I had just turned 5. It was the winter time. It was in northern Norway on a remote island 200 miles above the Arctic Circle, and I was very, very sick. There were no hospitals there. This was like 1960, almost, well, yeah, 1963. So it was a long time ago, and they thought I was going to die. My parents thought I was going to die. No hospitals, no way to get me anywhere. It's the middle of winter, and I couldn't move my head. I couldn't move my limbs. I had a high fever, and I went to lie down. They put me in this little day bed that my grandmother had in her kitchen of this old farmhouse, and I cried myself to sleep thinking I was going to die. So, and then I woke up and there was this bright light above me and like a healing, warm kind of light that made me feel good. And I've just thought everything's going to be okay. And I kind of dozed off. And when I woke up, my grandmother, and my mom were there in the kitchen. And then I got up, jumped up, and was running around, and they said it's a miracle. They thought, they couldn't believe it. And I told them about the light, and they said, "Oh, well, that's your guardian angel." It was a miracle. It was a healing, and so that's just what I believed, that it was a guardian angel. But later, I found out it was a little bit more to it than that. But that kind of opened the door for me for the rest of my life. So that's what started it. And once you have an experience, it just welcomes more experience because you know it's possible. So
Yeah, that's well. One, I love the fact that I was in Norway. That's incredible. I That's on my bucket list. Norway's been on my bucket list for a long time, especially a lot because Assassin's Creed, but still, it's been on my bucket list before that too. But uh, but I mean, and the fact you had a near-death experience, and that's what made you start believing in all this. That's the thing that really, it's a common thread in the paranormal world. Near-death experiences can lead to seeing and
Mhm.
hearing a lot of things that we normally wouldn't experience. But
Sure. Yeah,
that's,
and my mom was very psychic too. So
oh, okay.
she taught me how to do telepathy. So after that experience, we practiced reading cards, just regular playing cards, reading each other, sending, receiving, and I continued to have bizarre experiences frequently, but randomly, without really knowing how to manage it. I know a little bit better how to manage it now. I'm not saying I can totally control it, but it just kept happening. But that's kind of how it started. And we're talking about, telepathy, telekinesis, or psychokinesis, alien experience, ghost experiences, demons, cryptids, you name it. I've had experiences, and I'm kind of like a lightning rod for the paranormal, I guess, is what it is. I've just resigned myself to that. That's what it is. I'm just gonna, if something's going to happen, it's going to happen around me or to me.
Ooh, okay. This is gonna be a fun episode already. I can tell. But well, okay. I'm kind of curious about the telepathy thing a little more because I'll start there
Yeah.
because that's
Mhm.
when you say telepathy, like we're talking straight up Professor X, like being able to like being able to read
That's
people's minds, or
oh no, that there's kind of a yeah, okay. I'll tell you what I mean by that. It's not Harry Potter magic kind of stuff, It's and you don't really read minds. I don't read minds. I read intentions, and that's usually what people will tell you. Uh, that's why I've always had difficulty going to parties because I'll walk into the room and I'll like feel or hear other people's intentions, and that's almost more disturbing than hearing words, necessarily. And you have to be able to turn it off. So in order to survive. Otherwise, you'd go mad, So, but yeah, sometimes it's something that you would think would be pretty cool, but actually, it's not so fun sometimes. Kind of,
yeah,
kind of,
I have to imagine you go full. I have to imagine you would go full carry if you didn't learn how to control it.
yeah. You have to manage it. That's true. Yeah.
Why can't the spirits in my house ever turn on a freaking light for me? Like it's amazing. There we go. Thank you. Uh,
Yeah.
like when
Yeah.
you
You
live in
went dark there. I thought
a
you lost
possessed house.
power.
No, it's a sensor. It's a sensor light, and after the first couple times of me getting it on, it'll stay on for a long time. But
Oh, okay.
it's
I got.
just I gotta get an
Yeah.
electrician to put a real light out here. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I got you.
But but no, it's. I mean, I live in a possessed house too. You think the spirits would give me a hand once in a while, and just be like, "Light on." Uh,
Well, it depends on the spirit, Some of them have great senses of humor and are very mischievous. So,
ours are kind of ours are kind of boring. They kind of just don't interact with us at all. I know they're there because I do have some slight empath abilities, but
mhm,
other than that, like it's just they just watch. They just watch. They're
mhm.
watchers. I call them watchers, but and not the
Yeah.
creepy kind, but like I hope not at least. But they like to watch. I've had paranormal investigators in my house too when we first bought it, and they said like they just like to watch. Like that's what they kept saying with the housing rods. Like they just kept saying like they kept answering, yeah, we just like to watch because we never had kids, so we like to watch the kids. But
Oh,
it's
interesting. So, is it like an older couple?
yeah, it's the couple who built this house originally.
I don't.
They didn't die in the house, ironically enough, but they still hang around here.
They left their imprint there, and it could be so there are. It's not that they weren't intelligent, but they have things called non-intelligent hauntings. Where people leave their residual energy behind. And they could still even a person could even still be alive, but still leave their impressions of who they were in the house where they were in. That happened to me when I sold my house in Everett, Washington, and moved to Bowling Green, Ohio. The lady who bought the house is a friend of mine, and she said she still felt us and sometimes heard us in the house, but it wasn't. We weren't haunting the house because we were alive, So it was just some residual energy. But then, of course, when you die, then there's a transition. So that
Oh
it could be a number of things. But that's interesting. I'm glad it's not a malevolent spirit that's
yeah,
causing
yeah,
problems. So
yeah.
that's good.
I'm happy it's not a poltergeist type experience because my kids would not be going to bed easy if that was the case. Not that they go to bed easy anyway, but then it'd be
Yeah.
a lot harder. But
exactly.
Well,
It's hard enough getting kids to sleep. So yeah.
oh God, it's a nightmare on its own sometimes. But
Yep. Yep.
so I gotta ask though, because of these abilities coming up at a young age, is that why you
Mhm.
wanted to get into history? Is that why you became a history professor? Like, did the history
Well,
start
yeah. I
becoming
mean,
like a interest?
I I started well, I started writing very early. So I was and my dad was a storyteller. He was a fisherman and a carpenter, and he was quite a good storyteller. And he got me a typewriter when I was, probably 9 years old or 10 years old, and I started typing. I just always thought I was going to be a writer. Uh, I enjoyed stories, and especially his, because he was a sailor in the 1930s, traveled all around
Ooh,
the world. So I heard all these stories from Antarctica to India to Africa and around the world. He even came to the United States before they immigrated in 1948. He had been to the Great Lakes area, and um, yeah, so he had all these experiences to share. And of course he was. My parents lived through World War II under Nazi occupation in northern Norway. So my dad was in a labor camp during the war. So I grew up with all those stories. So naturally, I kind of gravitate to history. But I've tried other things. I was in the military for 6 years, active, and I was a carpenter for a while. I was in engineering school, but then dropped out. So I've tried different things, but being a history teacher is what I really enjoy. It's what I'm meant to do. So
honestly, it's one of those things that I almost wish I did in my life because I always loved history and it just like was one of those things that like I regret not doing because it's I'm not gonna say it's too late now, but it's just
no,
that time has passed. I feel like that time has passed. I don't have time to go to college anymore and do any of that stuff. I have a family now. I have to
yeah,
support, so
it's hard.
college.
It's
Yeah.
harder when you have little kids, although I did it, but it was a sacrifice. I'm not saying that it was the right thing to do because they were little and I missed a lot of time with them. So that's the two older ones anyway. The two younger ones I've been home, so that's different. But I understand. Believe me, it's a sacrifice. It
Oh,
is.
trust me. Yeah. I got a third one on the way, so
Ah,
it's a whole.
cool.
It's a whole. Yeah, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. There's no money for it. There's nothing for it. Like it just would never work.
Exactly.
But it road's not taken. That's the way I look at it. The road's not taken. But I tried being a biology teacher. That was my mistake. I should went with history instead of biology because I freaking ended up dropping out because it was just so having to remember the names of everything. It was just ugh. I don't even like thinking about it. It was just hell. But well,
Yeah,
actually,
I like science and well, I mean, I was in engineering, so I like science and math, but I spent the whole time in engineering school illustrating and writing a comic strip for the school newspaper. So I was more interested in that than in calculus or chemistry or
oof.
whatever I was taking at the time. So yeah,
Mm. Two of my banes right there. Oof. I chemistry is part of the reason I stopped going to college. But advanced chemistry is oof, no joke. But well,
yeah,
and actually, funny I said it's hell because that's actually a good segue. Because you said something about a demon experience, and I'm dying to hear about it.
yeah. Well, I've had a couple enough to I mean, when people hear that uh, I've had all these paranormal experiences. I've had people say, "Well, you should come over to such and such a place because there's a demon in there." And I'll go, "I believe you. I'm not going in there." I've had those experiences. I don't seek them out, but I've had them. Probably uh, the most recent one actually was in the south side of Chicago. I was on one of these late night. Well, it was coast to coast AM, with George Norrie and somebody, a film producer, was watching, and he wanted to do a documentary featuring a psychic. So he called me. He got a hold of me, emailed me, and I talked to him on the phone. He said, "I want to bring you to Chicago to test your psychic abilities." And I took it as a challenge. It's like, okay, he's going to make a documentary. That'd be cool. And, maybe I'll sell a few books and who knows, what'll happen. So, uh, I kind of pride took over and I said, okay, but my wife needs to come with. And he said, that's no problem. I'll fly her out too, put you up in a hotel. took me to different places in Chicago, and I was doing okay, like a graveyard, an old building, and so I figured kind of out what had happened there, but not really dramatic. Not because he was filming me and had me mic'd up and stuff, but nothing dramatic. So I was really feeling the pressure from him that, oh, this has got to you got to amp this up, or you're not gonna be in this documentary. So I said, well, I'll show him. Took me to the south side of Chicago. So I'm taking you to a place. A lot of weird stuff has happened here. That's all he said. I did no preparation or anything because that was the whole deal. He wanted me to figure out what had
Of course.
happened there. And I went in there blind, and I got out of the car. He parked in an Aldi's parking lot. It was this old part of south side of Chicago, pretty poor area. And as soon as I got out of the car, I saw like a film, an old black and white jerky film playing in my mind's eye, like from the 1880s, 1890s, horses and buggies and people in dark clothing rushing by, but they were all ignoring me. It was just like I was seeing this film in front of me. And usually I do protection, but I didn't do it this time. I do protection. I do very careful, but I just was so hell bent on impressing this guy. That was my mistake, big mistake, as it turned out. Anyway, so he got all this activity going on in this like black and white film in front of me, except for one guy standing in front of me who he was paying attention to me, and he was totally stationary. He had dark, scary, dark eyes, a bowler hat, and a one of those big waxed mustaches and an overcoat. And he was just sitting there, just staring at me, kind of scary. And all of a sudden, poof, the image went away. Right. So I thought, oh, I got to reconnect. I got to get this, what we call the signal line, to whatever's going on in that area to figure out what this place was. So I walked around. There was like an alleyway, an old tree, an old gnarly tree. Went up to it, touched it, because sometimes if you touch something from the past, you can pick up signals from it. And as soon as I went to touch it, I got it was like I was tackled to the ground, like in football, like somebody got me from behind and just drove me into the ground, and I couldn't get up. And the really bad part, I mean, I injured my left leg, pretty severely, and I was being held down on the ground. There was nobody there. It was a psychic force that drove me into the ground physically. And when I was pinned to the ground, uh, I was like losing my will to live. It was terrible. It was like my life force was draining out of me. And I saw beneath the ground, like in a dungeon, these people, like they were all bleeding and wailing, in agony and like reaching up, trying to pull me down underground. This is all what I'm seeing, right? And I'm telling the guy with my microphone what's going on. He didn't have a film on me because he was having trouble with the camera. But so he comes running out of the car with his camera, and there I am pinned to the ground. Well, finally I get up, and I said, you got to get me out of here. I don't know what happened here, but I don't want to be here. This is awful. And of course, it was my fault because I didn't do my normal protections. So I got blindsided, literally. And he said, yeah, I'm not feeling good either. Let's get out of here. So we, packed the stuff up, got in the car, we're driving away. And I said, what is this place? And he said, well, this is the site of the murder hotel where Dr. H. Holmes killed maybe about 300 people.
Oh.
He built a hotel during the Chicago World's Fair in 1893 or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the site of it. It wasn't there anymore, right? But there was a post office, there was an Aldi's, there was this old alleyway, and that's where it was. And I said, well, that makes sense. But I said, don't ever do that to me again. If it's a dangerous kind of really bad place, give me a little more warning. But I was mad at him, but really I should have been mad at myself because I set myself up for that. And anyway, so the I didn't know who H. Holmes was, to tell you the truth, which is kind of strange, but I didn't. And I went back to the hotel, and I got on my computer and Googled it, and the first thing that popped up was his picture, and it's this dude with a bowler hat and the the curly mustache, with the dark, scary eyes, And I said, "My God, that's the guy that was, I saw." So I'm not sure if it was his presence or spirit, or if it was the demonic entity and him together. I'm pretty sure it was whatever demonic entity that had possessed him was still there in that area. And I remember as we were driving away, the film producer said, "Notice the people around here." And I said, "Well, they all look pretty poor." He said, "Well, they're pretty miserable." And I said, "Well, if I was really, really poor, I would be miserable too." And he said, "No, there's something else." And I looked at people and they look kind of like lost souls. It was just a really depressing area. And I can't help but think that whatever demonic entity was active was still there. And so that's just one experience I had that was very, very, very bad. And the big lesson, of course, is you should always do protection. Don't mess around with demons. If there's a demon there, just believe people. Just say, okay, I understand. I'm not going to go test it out or play with it. I have friends who are. I have a friend actually who's a an exorcist, and he's not in the Catholic Church
Yeah.
exorcist, but he does, and he's in Las Vegas, so I'm sure he gets a lot of work there. He
Mhm.
says he does, but yeah, I would leave it to those guys. They know what to do. That's kind of their expertise. So I don't dabble with that if I can help it. But anyway, that was probably one of the worst experiences because the residual attachment, the energy, the negative drain was with me for a while. I was teaching a paranormal class at the school, and when I went to the week later, I was in class, and I had a lot of people who were psychics in like working psychics in my class, and they couldn't even stand to be in the classroom with me. A couple of them had to get up and leave, and so I had to have a friend of mine who's a Peruvian shaman do a cleansing to get rid of it all. It's kind of like remnants of the awful experience. We're still kind of clinging to me, if you will. And I needed to be spiritually cleansed. And after that, I felt a lot better. So that was a very terrible experience.
I mean, I will say, because of course, in this day and age, I know who H. Holmes was because he's been publicized and documented like crazy
Mhm.
in the last 20
Right.
years. And I mean, the part of the whole season of American Horror Story Hotel was based on him. But
I've heard that.
and
Yeah.
I mean, and I've heard numerous podcasts about him, but
Mhm.
he was a very, very evil man. And
Yes.
if there is one person who could have died and went to some other dimension that we might call hell and come back as some kind of demonic entity, it would be him. Because, it'd be stupid for that dimension not to let him come back because he would reap terror on Earth. That's what
Oh,
he did
sure.
while he was here. So why would he do it in the afterlife?
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, that's it's funny because when you're talking about the black and white movie like scene,
Hmm.
I was almost seeing like that one
Hmm.
scene from It Chapter One where they're watching the projector reel and like all of a sudden you see like Pennywise turn around like and start moving in it, and I I am a I am a freaking lightning rod for pop culture references. It's what I do, but
No.
it's my
Yeah.
talent. It's my talent.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what came to mind. But if I was gonna compare anybody to a fictional character like Pennywise, H. Holmes would be damn close. So
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
he didn't focus on kids, but close enough. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's just damn. That's one hell of an experience. That's amazing. Too bad they didn't get it on film. That would have been that
I
documentary would
know.
have sold millions if they got that on film.
It was just the audio, and who knows? It might have been the demonic entity that messed with the electronics. Of course, that's very common, in these kind of
Oh God, yeah.
experiences.
They don't want
But
to be seen. Yeah.
yeah, the audio did work. So, but yeah, I was physically injured. It took 6 months I hyperextended my left big toe and damaged whatever you call that, the kneecap thing, in the left knee. So
Oh,
the
something
meniscus or whatever, yeah, whatever they call that thing.
a capula or scapula, something like that. But
Yeah,
I'm
I can't remember, but yeah, so it was, psychic damage and physical damage. I mean, you're talking about a very, very powerful entity. So whoever's listening, don't go there if you don't have to. And if you do, make sure you got a young priest and an old priest or whatever, to go with you or something. A lot of protection, don't go unarmed.
oh, actually, I know some people who would probably love to go there fully protected, of course, and
Yeah,
they would.
yeah.
I know some people who would probably would love to try to get rid of that and try to vanquish that. But I
Yeah.
I know some people who do that commonly with places where demonic entities are known to be. They they like to get tested too in a way. But
It would it
I
would
mean it.
prob it would probably help those poor people in that neighborhood, I'll tell you that. That would probably be a good service if they could do it somehow, but I don't know.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. But well, I guess the next thing that because I'm saving the best for last, and I damn well know it, so I'm putting off what I really want to ask. But
That's right.
but the alien experiences, that's what because we don't
Yeah.
get many of that in this. We don't. I mean, we don't get a lot of a lot of the things you mentioned. We don't get in this show, so I'm
Mhm.
kind of savoring this episode right now. But
Okay.
what, I'm trying to hear about what kind of alien experience you had because I've had a few of those on this show and with different species
Yeah.
as well. So trying to
Yeah.
hear which ones you've been familiarized with.
Yeah, well, there's different encounters that I've had. I've, had, a classic abduction experience, like in, 1973. It was a classic one. Uh I was taken out of my room in my home in north of Seattle in a place called Kenmore, Washington State, and taken up into a craft and on a table kind of a thing. And there was an insectoid doctor
Ooh,
who was doing a procedure, and I asked him, what was going on, and he said, "Special processing, and that's all you need to know." And I remember there was this like clamp device on my head, and there were these little guys, the little grays around me. And I said, "This hurts. This thing on my head hurts." And I didn't like I said, "I don't like being here." And he said, "Well, you need special processing. That's all you need to know." And I said, "Well, this thing hurts my head." And he admonished these little guys. This is all telepathic, you know, chatter going
yeah,
on. And the little guys, removed either they removed it or it was removed telekinetically or whatever, and then it wasn't painful anymore. And I started to ask more questions, and then he just touched my head, and next thing I know, I was in my bed again. And so that was 1973, and I've had an alien experience in 1977. I was on a I mean, I've had earlier ones too when I was a kid, but this one's kind of unique. 1977, I was on a road trip from Seattle to Salt Lake City, and then we were going to go on to Las Vegas, and then up, down to L.A., San Francisco, and then back up to Seattle. I was 18. My friend was 18. I call him Ernie, and I'll tell you why I call him Ernie in just a minute or so. But anyway, so we were on this road trip. We ill planned, 18-year-olds having fun. We got as far as the wilderness in near Black Pine Peak in Idaho. So we decided we're just going to try to find a campground. Well, it was already dark; it was pitch black. So drove on this dirt road off the highway and ended up in just off the side, like in a clearing. And just a perfect setup below Black Pine Peak. I mean, how perfect a setting for an abduction would that be, right? So we're there, and almost right away, we started seeing both of us started seeing lights, these weird lights, and we thought that was just somebody driving up the dirt road, to us. But the lights were coming from weird directions, like higher and lower and above us, and we thought, "Oh, this is strange." And then I swore I saw like dark figures around our car, and that's and we were both talking about it, and then it's like I was out. I mean, that's all I remembered at that time, that there was kind of a weird sound. There was these dark figures around the car. There were the lights coming in everywhere. Um, so I decided to do one of those hypnotic regressions because I knew something weird happened. I knew something weird happened. I just didn't have all the details, and so I did a hypnotic regression, and I decided to contact my friend Ernie. And because from that hypnotic regression, I kind of filled in the details that these dark figures were indeed tall gray aliens, and they were around the vehicle. And one of the things the hypnotic regressionist, who's Yvonne Smith, she's very famous, here in Southern California, and she asked me during the regressions. She said, "Okay, you got these aliens around the car, these lights. They have a craft there. There's some kind of thing going on. Look next to you in your mind's eye. Look back. What is your friend Ernie doing?" So I like thought about it, and I looked. Oh, he's gone. Ernie's gone. It was an abduction. It wasn't my abduction. It was my friend Ernie's abduction, right? So I called up Ernie after this regression, and I was starting to write about the story. I was publishing some books about my paranormal experiences, and I wanted to get background and corroboration, right, from him
Yeah,
because
of
it was a
course.
dual experience. And I asked Ernie, I just said, "Do you remember that trip we took? And that Black Pine Peak and all that?" "Oh yeah, I remember." And then he said, "Yeah, the weird lights and we thought there was somebody around the car." And then he said, "Yeah, I don't really remember much more after that." And I said, "Well, uh, and this was after talking to him for a while. And then I said, "Well, Ernie, I'm pretty sure you were abducted." And oh my God, he got quiet. It was like like I had told him I hated him or something. I mean, it was like silence. And then finally he said, "I wish you would have told me that right away, because I wouldn't have talked about this. And by the way, if you're writing a story, you can't use my name." And I said,
Yeah.
"Okay, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to make you upset." And he said, "Absolutely, I don't want to talk about this. That's it." And he hung up the phone. So I sent him several emails saying, "I'm very sorry. I didn't mean to, upset you. I was just trying to find out and if there's anything I can do." And then finally he sent me an email, and that's the last communication I ever got from him. That was several years ago. And he said, "Bruce, yes, I do remember what happened, and I do remember that these aliens took me, and I remember that they told me they said this guy's a squealer. You think he'd never seen a set of pincers before, like pincers, right? Pincers."
Hmm.
uh, and uh, and then he said, "Maybe you feel bad because you allowed your best friend to be abducted." And he said, "But I'm not gonna, you can't use my name." And he said that was it. That was the last communication I had from him. So I, I that his mentioning the pincers kind of caused me to think of something, and I went to look through my old books of poetry because I write poetry too, and I've been writing poetry since I was in high school. So from 1977, I still had the poem I wrote from that trip, and the poem was entitled "The Visitors." And in that poem, I talk about how I had helped the aliens abduct people, not necessarily my friend Ernie, but that I had sold out. And I think I said I sold out to the aliens. And then I mentioned in that poem, I say, "And they're pincers, they're steel like pincers." And when I read that, I go, "Man, I didn't even remember writing that, but here it is, right in front of me, this old tattered, poem that I'd written." So now I had like written evidence from that time period, Ernie's email, my experiences, and the regression to kind of put this whole thing together. And I asked the regressionist Yvonne Smith. I said, "Does this happen when two people have the same experience and they break up friendships or marriages or relationships?" And she says it happens all the time. One person wants to deal with it, the other doesn't, and it causes a rift. She says
Hmm.
it's more common than not that happens. And it's happened to another friend of mine, Terry Lovelace, who wrote a book, "Incident at Devil's Den." Him and a buddy, Air Force buddy, both got abducted at the same time, and the other one, it broke up their friendship. The other one didn't want to deal with it, and so it's not unusual. So, and I had, like I said, in '73, and then the first one alien experience that I remember was 1964, and it was a kind of a rescue experience. Anyway, I don't have to go into that, but I've had a lot of those experiences, mm, and also with lately, well, really my whole life, but in not controlling, but in managing this connection. I've made a reconnection with an alien entity, or an NHI, I guess you'd call it, a non-human intelligence, named Anzar, and he's been around me my whole life. So intervening, helping, and since 2017, I've been communicating with him and other spirits and so forth on my weekly spirit walks, and I document all those spirit walks. I record what I hear or see or feel, and I record my own voice as I'm asking questions, and then I come back and transcribe it. And I have like 350 pages of single spaced notes from all those spirit walks in the last since the last 7 years. And I've created a couple of books out of that. My most recent book, "We Are the Aliens," that has a section dedicated to those transcripts. And so I have regular contact with an NHI, and I've had these other experiences, like I've mentioned. So yeah, and it's a very remarkable thing. But it's the thing that I've come to learn is that the spirit world, the alien world, and the quantum world are all really the same thing.
Yeah,
They're not they're not
they are.
separate.
They
So
are. That also is a hypothesis I've kind of come to
mhm.
conclude as well after over 200 episodes of this show, talking to a lot of
Yeah,
different guests about their experiences. It's
yeah,
very most likely that it's all just different dimensions. That's all it is, just different dimensions that
yeah,
either are around us all the time and we can't see or sense, or just different dimensions completely that are not even on the same plane as ours. We just get transported there because these creatures know how to go back and forth and we don't. That's the
yeah.
bottom line of it. But
We catch glimpses of it occasionally, accidentally. A lot of people, everybody's had experiences, just not everybody acknowledges it. That's the thing.
uh,
It's really who we are as ancient people. We were very paranormal, as ancient people, and we just got driven out of us, with the scientific revolution, which brought about wonderful things. But the bad thing is that we lost kind of our ancient selves. But if you talk to indigenous people like the Aborigines, Native Americans, whatever, this is a very common thing. I mean, they don't even think it's remarkable. They just
no, they
think
don't.
that's just our natural world. What are you guys talking about? It's
Very true. Which I mean,
normal.
and and you're 100% right. Yeah, well, the regressionist you used is 100% right because these kind of encounters can destroy friendships. I mean,
Yeah,
look at Patterson-Gimlin and the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot film.
yeah,
It broke up. There was four of them on that freaking trip, and
yeah,
it caused all of them to lose their friendships with each other for a long time until like the late 2000s when they finally like met again for the first time in a long time and discussed what they saw out there. And that's when a couple of them actually took back what they said years ago and said like, no, it was all real. It was all real. We said it was
yeah.
fake because we wanted to be out of it. We didn't want anything to do with it for a while. But
Yeah, no, and
I
I
mean,
I understand it. I understand Ernie's position. If he doesn't want to deal with it, I'm not going to force him to. So, but if he ever changes his mind, I'll be the first one to help him, guide him, whatever, to whatever he wants. I will help. I'll get on a plane and go to where he is and help him, whatever it takes. That's how important it is to me to help him. But you can't help somebody who doesn't want to deal with it. It just makes it worse for them, in a way.
s-
So
sadly, as the case most often the time is for people like that, they don't deal with it until they're on their deathbeds. That's when they deal with it. That's when they
yeah, that
realize
could
they
very
need to
well
admit
be.
something. I
Yeah.
mean, but then again, who knows? Some of them don't either. I mean,
Yeah.
I if you listen to those deathbed confession TV shows or
Mhm.
podcasts, like there's some crazy things that get revealed when people know they're about to die and they don't have to worry about
Yeah.
anything anymore. It's
Yeah.
just things that come out of that
Yeah.
could be insanely crazy. But I did just mention the Patterson-Gimlin film, so I'm kind
Mhm.
of leaning towards the topic I've been waiting to hit towards the end all night because
Sure.
I knew it was gonna make me giddy like a schoolgirl, so I wanted to save it. But You said you had cryptid experiences, and
Yeah.
that is my golden goose on this show. Always, I do not get them, but maybe once every 50 episodes if I'm lucky.
Mhm.
So I am dying to hear what kind of cryptid experiences you have had. I've been dying for this. Dying.
Yeah, well, okay. I got a couple of good ones. One is more of a classic one that was more recent, but I'll go back to when I was a kid. This shouldn't be surprising to your listeners or to you. When I was a kid, I liked to hang out at graveyards because I felt okay around the dead. It didn't bother me. I'd take my little kid friends with me. I was like 7 or 8 years old, and I've already had weird experiences, right? So
Hmm.
we drive, we ride our little bikes to the, with the old banana seats and the big handlebars back in the '60s, and we ride up to the local graveyard, and we have our lunch. Well, one time we decided, because my brother had told me that if you went down the other side of the road, there was the crematorium, and then there was this old dirt road through the woods that went down to what he called a swamp pond, which sounded intriguing to a little kid. It's like a swamp pond. That sounds excellent, right? So we ate our lunch, we were hanging out with the dead people, and then we went down that little dirt road. It was kind of scary. It was still daytime, but it was getting darker and darker. And then we got to the swamp pond, and it's got lily pads and it's kind of moss hanging down. You can imagine what it looks like, right? It's kind of scary. And we were there, and all of a sudden, on the other side of the swamp pond, we heard this weird, like the crackling of sticks and stickers and blackberries, and like something was going on or moving around over there. We couldn't quite make it out. My friends got scared and they took off on their bikes. Well, I tried to take off too, but on those old bikes that we had, the chain came off. It always was coming off at the most critical situation,
Of
right?
course.
So
Of
my
course.
chain comes off. I'm struggling to get the chain back on. This thing is getting closer. It's coming around. It's coming around to where we were, and it was extra creepy because there was like these cement crypts piled up there, and the teenagers, I guess, who had been there, probably my brother, had spray painted something on the crypts and had left beer bottles, there or whatever, uh, Rainier beer, if you want more detail. But anyway, so I finally got the chain on, and the noise was getting closer and closer, big, this horrible noise. So I started going up the dirt road, and as I looked back because I was just wanted to see what was this thing. Well, it was kind of murky, and I couldn't quite see, but there was something on its back legs. It kind of looked like a wolf, but it was on its back legs by the crypt. Kind of with its hands up on the crypt, and it was not a wolf. It was because it was too big. It wasn't a dog. It wasn't a person. I don't know what it was, a werewolf. I don't know what it was, but it was not human and it was not a regular animal. And it was a perfect location for this thing to be. And what a creepy place for it to be. And
Mm.
so
What you are what
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
what you're describing, and what location was this? Like, was this Norway or was this?
No, this is in Kenmore, Washington. So
Ah,
it's
okay.
in the north end of Seattle, kind of a rural
Which,
area in those days.
well, I mean, that's good territory for this. So there's a lot of good territory for this. But what you're describing, I mean, you said it kind of looked wolfish, but not exactly like a wolf.
Right. Right.
I'm thinking Dogman.
It could very well have been. It was on its back legs. It's two, it was up on two legs, kind of lean with like this against those creepy crypts that were there, and I couldn't quite make out all the details. Plus, I was really scared, and I just had my chain and I just kept going. So uh, but yeah, it could very well be. I never knew what it was. I just always thought it was one of the scarier experiences I'd ever had. It was very dramatic because of the chain coming off too. So, but the other one is a more classic one. My wife Ginger and I were coming back from Seattle, a road trip up to Seattle, driving through Northern California, and we were not far from, I think it's called Oric, on the Redwoods Highway, right? Through the
Uh-huh.
windy highway, almost to Oric, maybe about 5 miles from Oric. in Northern California. And I was driving, it was really dark, and all of a sudden on the side of the road, I mean, like, and it's a narrow 2-lane road, right? Uh, there was something right on the pavement, right on the side, and it was very, very tall. And as we drove closer and the headlights kind of caught the edge of it, it was Bigfoot. It was Bigfoot. And now I remember I was driving and I was so taken by it. But I felt like I better keep going, because it was right next to, like, I'd say we passed within a foot, like 12 inches from it, my mirrors, on the side of the truck. We
Of
drove
course.
by and I woke up Ginger. She was sleeping and she was on the passenger side where it was. And I said, I just saw Bigfoot. And she said, no. And I said, yeah. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to turn around and go back. And she said, no. And I said, oh, I'm going to stop. I'm going to go back and see. And she goes, don't you dare stop. You keep going. And I said, well, I'm kind of tired too. And maybe, we should stay in Oric. It's only 5 miles away. No, you keep driving. You keep going. It's not like she believed it, but she was scared, because maybe, right? That's what she was
Yeah, of
thinking.
course.
And then I didn't know it at the time. I mean, I'd obviously heard about the classic Bigfoot footage in Northern California, right? And the one walking by the timber that's fallen, and
Oh, the Patterson-Gimlin film, like I talked about earlier.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I, so I thought, okay, how many other Bigfoot sightings have there been there? And oh my God, there's a ton of them. And of course, that
Oh,
was filmed in the woods, probably just a few miles away from where that incident had occurred near Oric. And so yeah, that's my Bigfoot experience. So those are two of my cryptid experiences that were kind of fun. And
oof.
and I always think about the old he's dead now, but the comedian Mitch Hedberg. You remember that? You ever hear of that guy?
I know.
Or seen?
Yep. I know who Mitch Hedberg is. Yep.
Yeah, and he had that routine where he says, why is it that people always say that the film they take of Bigfoot is always blurry or whatever, and why can't they have clear film of him? And I and then the joke is he said, well, maybe Bigfoot is blurry, and it's a joke, right? So it's kind of funny. But what I understand, it's an interdimensional kind of thing, and you might be catching it in phase, so you might, by the time you get a camera or just maybe the effect of whatever, that it's an interdimensional creature, which is what Native Americans a friend of mine who went to Pine Ridge uh, met with a lot of, people there, the Native Americans there, and they have Bigfoot sightings all the time. I mean, it's just all the time at Pine Ridge. So, and
Mm.
they think they're interdimensional. That's what they think. So I kind of
It's
go along with that hypothesis.
yeah. It's highly. See, this is a theory that I freaking hated when I first started doing this podcast, and I used to try to fight it constantly.
Hmm.
But as a mature adult, I had to eventually realize maybe I'm wrong, and that I kind of can see the hypothesis that Bigfoot is ultra terrestrial, which means
Hmm.
interdimensional creature. Because I
Yeah.
mean, it would make sense. I mean, it would make sense to why there's never bodies when they are supposedly killed and shot,
Hmm.
or why people, and the fact that the cameras never can get really a clear shot of them. Because I mean, don't get me wrong, I have seen some clear shots of Bigfoot,
Hmm.
but I think that these ultra terrestrial creatures, and Bigfoot's not the only one by far, but I think they have the ability to affect technology.
Yeah.
I think they have some kind of psychic ability to affect technology and make it not function as good as it should. They may not completely stop it from working, but they will make it stop working somewhat.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we can't get a good picture of Bigfoot. I mean, some people have. Some people have. I think you have to catch them unaware to do that. I think
Hmm.
it has to be a conscious thing they're doing. I don't think it just happens like that because I don't think it's an unconscious thing. I think
Right.
it's a very conscious thing they have to do to make it work like that. But I mean, part of me always wanted to believe the whole Gigantopithecus thing, and that's what Bigfoot are, which may be true to some degree. I mean, I just had Leslie and Stephen Shaw on the show a couple weeks ago. I don't know if you heard of them, but they're huge alien abductee. They've been his family has been abducted for 3 generations,
Mhm.
so it's a huge history of alien abductions there. And where the hell was I going with this, Stephen? Oh, but they believe. I mean,
Oh, the
they
interdimensional
have.
aspect, yeah.
Well, yeah. They have a belief that all these extraterrestrials, Palladians, reptilians, all these other ones I can't think of at the moment, have been around since we were cavemen.
Mhm.
And when the Great Flood happened, that happened in every myth, and like they told me they actually had the number, but a crazy amount of mythos throughout the history of Earth.
Sure.
The Great Flood happened everywhere in every mythology. So it happened, obviously, but they believe that the extraterrestrials took all the humans who were smart enough to go with them to underground bunkers when this happened, and that's where they went. They went to They went to the Hollow Earth theory comes into play here, and they went
Mhm.
down into the Earth and survived and thrived. While the humans who were left on Earth because they were too stubborn or too stupid to go down basically stayed dumb. And they are the humans that a majority of us are nowadays because we evolved since then. We got more intelligent to some degree, I'll say, but I'm not going to give us too much credit because we're humans. But the it's believed now that the ones who went with the extraterrestrials in the bunkers and into the Earth are their descendants are what we call star seeds. That they are the ones who are connected to the
Mhm.
extraterrestrials, the ultra-terrestrials. They're the ones that are like you, are a lightning rod for everything paranormal. So, I mean, it's not the first time I heard that theory, but it's the first time I really had it elaborated like that, and it does make a lot of sense to me. I've been mulling it over for weeks now in my head, and
Mhm.
because this is what I do during the day when I'm fucking working, I think about paranormal stuff. But um,
Well, it's hard not to.
it's hard not to, and I mean,
Yeah.
this theory does make sense though, because I mean, it would explain so much, and I mean, the Hollow Earth theory is explains a lot for cryptids because it gives them places to hide on Earth where they can
Mhm.
get away from humanity because humanity's not friendly to anything they don't understand. But they this
That's true.
the same guest also told me that there's a scientist, I don't know her name for the life of me, but there's a scientist in California who supposedly has found proof of Bigfoot
Hmm.
because she met she uses this lake in California, this big lake, and she looks at all the urines that's in it, urine from different animals, and
Mhm.
okay, most of them are identifiable animals that we know exist. But she found one that's not identifiable, but is a primate in
Hmm.
California, and she also has hair samples that cannot be anything. They're not identifiable either, but they match a lot of other hair samples that have been found across the United States and are all identifiable primate hair that's
Mhm.
close to humans. So, I mean, it basically, what I'm basically saying is that Bigfoot has been proven at this point. It's just it's up to the government when they want to admit it. But like they did admit that they knew UFOs were a real thing until COVID. Who knows what will have to happen for them to admit that Bigfoot's real. So, because
Yeah.
the government doesn't like to admit anything ever. Why
It
would they
it
be wrong
makes
about something?
it makes it very difficult when they also have to when they say, well, like my friend Gene, I grew up with him. He's Norwegian American too, and we were kids together, grew up together, and he died in 2016. A month after he died, he came to me in a vision, and just like you and I are talking almost, and except he was more of a holographic type image, but it was an intelligent conversation. He told me that it was time for me to start publishing my stories. Don't be afraid. And I said, well, I don't want to be thrown out of the college where I teach. I mean, is it going to be accepted? I hadn't really talked publicly about it before. And he said, don't worry, the time is right. And of course, he was right. That was 2016. The time was right. And even gave me the title of the books. They should be called Timeless. And so I followed his advice and I wrote the stories. And But one of the things he said, what I was leading to, is that he said, Bruce, I asked him a bunch of questions. Well, does this really happen? Is this real? Is this real? He said, Bruce, let me just cut to the chase. It's all true. It's all true. And what I believe what the government is really afraid of with this UFO thing is if they say yes, it's yeah, we do have crashed craft or recovered craft, whatever. The only way to control those things is through psychic ability. Then they have to
Mhm.
admit that telepathy is real. Then they have to admit that telekinesis is real. Then they have to admit all the other paranormal things are real, right? In addition to UFOs, then they have to admit Bigfoot is real. Then they have to admit, I mean, non-human intelligences. They have to admit, interdimensionals, in which they've already talked about. I've heard a congressman, I think accidentally, a congresswoman actually, accidentally coming out of a SCIF briefing, secure compartmentalized
Yeah.
information facility, say something about interdimensionals. You know, nobody asked her a question about interdimensional. She just said, "Well, we think these interdimensionals could be whatever." And it's like she was just saying what she was just told, and I think it was kind of she slipped, she didn't mean to say that or mean to
Well,
reveal that, but they have to admit all that stuff's real. And once they do
I
that,
mean,
people realize we have we have the ability to connect with these things and to practice telepathy and even psychokinesis to a certain degree, and then the government's going to lose complete control of us. I mean, they don't want to
well,
lose control of us. That's the
I mean
problem.
that. Well, that's the thing that's funny though, because
Yeah.
since the documents had to be released through the Freedom of Information Act, the government kind of already did this because we know about the Montauk Project, we know about MK Ultra, we know about all these things they've done in the 70s, 60s, 80s to try to test the ability of people's minds and how far people can
Hmm.
take things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the government's only a few steps away from opening the door completely. And
Yeah.
from what I've been told by psychics and mediums, 2027 is going to be a big year for government announcements about paranormal topics.
I wouldn't doubt it. There's the thing is there's resistance. There's those in the government that would like to do that. There's different factions that vary from total disclosure to no, we're going to shut it down before it gets too far, even though the cat's out of the bag, like you said. But they can still deny and deny or whatever. But uh, eventually, there there is going to be such overwhelming evidence revealed that even the fiercest skeptic is going to have to at least be agnostic, but probably go beyond that. But I think what it'll take, what I'm being told, what it'll take is not so much a disclosure as a revelation. Revelation meaning knowing from within. And that's what will cause this next step in our evolution. What I'm being told is a leap of consciousness, and at that point we will evolve. But there's a lot of resistance to it. That's the problem. There's a
Oh,
lot of
there,
resistance to it.
I mean, in as a history professor, you damn well know this, but in every historical movement, there's always been resistance for it,
Yeah.
and that's the whole reason we had the Civil Wars because people were resisting
Yeah.
recognizing that a different race, a different color, were the same as them. That's why, and I mean, resistance isn't futile like they like us to believe. It has
Hmm.
merit nowadays, and every generation does a little bit of change. Every generation
Yeah.
changes something in this country, especially. Every generation changes something, but
No,
in the
you're
world,
you're
but
right. I was given this definition of history when I was in graduate school. One of my professors said, "Here, I'll give you a good definition of history: forces for change and forces against change over time." And I keep coming back to that. Every beginning of every semester, I tell my students that. I say, "This is a good way of understanding history. There's push and pull. There's a dynamic going. Forces for change, forces against change, trying to pull us back, right? And over time, right? So, but as we know, understanding quantum physics, we know that time as we think it linear isn't really, that's not reality. The quantum reality is that there is no past or future. It's all just happening at the same time. But the problem is that most people can't get their minds around that. So we have the interface, which is the objective reality that we live. Every once in a while, we catch the glimpses, of these,
Yeah,
or we have the subjective reality that is our interface. Every once in a while, we catch glimpses of the objective, reality where all these things happen or where they are, and how things
exactly.
really, you know.
I mean, it's funny because I when I started the show, I honestly didn't put too much thought into the name because it just kind of called out to me. It was originally going to be called Paranormal is the New Normal, and one of my friends was like, "Take out the is." I'm like, "Okay." So I'm like, "Paranormal the New Normal." It works, and
Yeah.
it's funny though because the amount of people just by hearing that name and if they're in the paranormal world, they want to be on the show because they're like that. They're like the message you're putting out there is what the world needs. They're like paranormal is the new normal. It will be. It already
Yeah.
is. It's more and more people are embracing it than they ever have in the past. If you told someone 50 years ago that you want to talk about ghosts, about Bigfoot, about sea monsters, about anything of the top, any of these topics, aliens, they would look at you like you're halfway insane and want to lock you up in a mental asylum.
Sure.
Nowadays, though, it's common topic. There's conventions everywhere for it. It's just
Hmm.
it's a new way of accepting the life. It's a new way of accepting the world. These things exist, and people are finally willing to talk about it. People are finally willing to share their experiences. Most people, not everybody, but most people. And
Yeah.
the amount of people, I mean, look at these groups on Facebook, and I'm in so many Bigfoot groups, and so many people admitting to having Bigfoot experiences.
Hmm.
How could this not be real when thousands of people have seen the same exact thing with the same exact details and the same exact type of sightings and the same exact type of interactions? How can
Yeah.
this not be real? I mean, it
Yeah.
blows
And
my
think,
mind when anybody tells me they don't believe in aliens, they don't believe in ghosts, they don't believe in Bigfoot. Like it blows my mind. I'm like, how can you be so fucking naive?
well, think of the people that have suffered before us, like if you think of, Bigfoot, for instance, the professor at Washington State University, now his name escapes me, but you probably know who he is, who I'm talking about. He was the number one Bigfoot researcher academically at a university level.
Oh, Grover Krantz?
Yeah, yeah, Grover. And
Yeah.
they tried to get rid of him all the time. I mean, they were just merciless. Or with UFOs, there was John Mack, the professor of psychiatry at Harvard. They tried to get rid of him. He had to get a lawyer to protect him, to keep his job because he was taking abduction, people who've been abducted by aliens seriously. And they were just trying to do their job as academics, do real research. And they faced, being fired. So I'm glad that it's a little bit more acceptable now, but there's still resistance in terms of like with researchers, like grants and stuff like that, especially scientists. They're more driven by grants. And a lot of them are afraid to express their views too much because they're afraid it'll cut off like half of the grant sources rather than this large pool of grants they could qualify for. Instead, now it's cut if they
Yep.
admit to, that. So there's
That
still that, there is still that fear that's very real for some people. For me, I'm 65. I could retire. It doesn't. What are they going to do to me? I mean, there's nothing they can do to me. It's not like I'm at the beginning of my career where
which
I have to worry. I'm not worried.
exactly, and that's actually funny you say that because I was just gonna say like from people I talk to alone, a lot of them have told me like off camera like I waited 40 years till I was at a point in my career where I could actually go out and talk about this in public and not get
Yeah.
absconded for it, not get kicked
Yeah.
out of my job for it. Like it's and a lot same thing with government officials. A lot of government officials wait until
Sure.
they're close to retirement before they start be willing to come on shows like this and talk about it because they don't want to get the government to kick them out of the fucking job. They don't want to lose their pension,
Sure.
their tenure, or anything. I mean, it's sad. It really is. And
It's
but
dollars and cents. It comes down to dollars and cents and just having to live. And like David Grush, how he was mercilessly attacked and they tried to ruin his reputation by coming forward. And that's just I mean, my son, who's currently my eldest son, who's in the Air Force at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base,
Ooh.
he has had experiences, a lot of experiences, and at Wright-Patterson, he works in Area B too, the super secret part, and he actually works at the Air Force Research Laboratory in Area B on Wright-Patterson, and he has some things he needs to get out. But and I told him, I said, contact your member of Congress. Some of them will help you, and they'll actually cut through the red tape to get your medical records or whatever it is you need. And I've actually had the members of Congress help me. And I said, besides, there is a whistleblower protection, for people that are in the service or in the government.
Yep.
And he goes, Dad, do you really believe they would leave me alone? and I and he said, do you think that he said, I don't believe that whistleblower stuff really works. He's nervous. And like you said, all these other potential whistleblowers that have all this information, they saw what happened to David Grush. They saw what happened to other people. Uh, and David Grush even admitted people have been harmed and even killed over this. So
Oh,
it's a very real fear. I'm not talking about myself. I mean, what the worst thing that I imagine could happen is that they'd fire me from my job or something. I didn't think I was going to be, the college would kill me or something, but if I was in a top secret clearance type job, who
well,
knows?
the college won't. The government 100% will do what they have to silence people.
Oh, sure.
There are. It's funny because it's funny you mentioned Grover Krantz because
Hmm.
his niece or great niece has a podcast called Wild Thing,
Oh, I didn't know
and
that. Wow.
the whole first season is her talking about Bigfoot,
Okay.
and her uncle is brought up in it a lot. Like Grover's
Hmm.
brought up in it a lot. Like he's talked about it a lot, and yeah, he went through hell. He went through hell for what he believed.
Yes.
And then, I mean, she did a season on extraterrestrials too. She did a season on nuclear power and
Hmm.
nuclear war. She did a
Hmm.
whole season on that. I don't think her fourth season has come out yet. If she's still doing it, I honestly, I'm so far behind on podcasts. I'm funny, but
Well,
but
there's
yeah.
so many to keep up with. It's hard to keep up with.
Oh, it is, and I mean,
Yeah.
her that's why I know that name Grover Krantz though is because
Yeah.
of her because she publicized who he is and what he did. But
Yeah.
I do want to thank you for coming on, Bruce, because it has been an incredible freaking show. This has been.
Yeah.
I could go
Well,
for.
thank
I can go for. I could go on for hours with you, but I do gotta get sleep at some point tonight.
Oh,
but
okay, Jeremy. Well, thank you. I really appreciate the invite, and I had fun
but
talking.
definitely before we go though, tell my audience where they can find your books, where they can find more about you if they want to hear more about you. Just
Sure.
promote yourself to the fullest.
Yeah, yeah. Just my full name, BruceOlavSolheim.com. They can see everything I'm up to, but all my books and comic books and stuff that I've published are all on Amazon. So you just need my name, Bruce Solheim, on Amazon, and you'll find everything, all my comics and my paranormal books and all my pre-paranormal books, all my regular history and political science books that I've written. So the whole thing. So I really appreciate your time, and I hope your audience enjoys what we've been talking
Oh,
about. I'm pretty sure they will.
I have no freaking doubt in my mind they'll enjoy it. But
Okay.
uh, for all the people who've been watching, thank you. We got a couple likes, so people already are loving it. But
Yay.
so thank you to everybody watching. Yeah, and to all my listeners, I hope you enjoyed. I know you will. I know you will. I already know some groups on Facebook that are going to eat this whole interview up with a passion. But you all know where you can find me. Yeah, I'm not gonna give you a shit if you don't know. I mean, I'm gonna give you a shit, but still, you should know. But if you don't, check the outro for all my listeners. It's all in there. If you're watching, it's on the bottom of the damn screen. Just watch it over. But until next time, I will be back, I believe, next week at some point with more interviews, of course. So have a good weekend, everybody. Enjoy Memorial Day. Don't drink too much. I mean, drink whatever the hell you want. I really don't care, but be safe about it. Until then, have a good one.